Good morning.
Good morning.
Such a blessing to be back here. And my heart is very glad to see you on this beautifully crisp Utah morning. Just a few days we will be greeting the spring equinox, this magical time where the sun sits vertical along our planet's equator, where day and night are almost equal everywhere in the world. This is one of the most exciting days of the year to me. It speaks of hope, and hopeful days full of warm sunshine, children laughing, flowers rising from the newly thawed mountain soil. It makes me feel refreshed and renewed. The spring equinox is very much the same here as it is in the world over. Hindus here and abroad celebrate with their festival of the Holi, where crowds gather to toss rainbow-colored dust into the air to celebrate the return of life-giving monsoon season in their homeland. Thailand in the Far East celebrates by honoring Songkran, which is their version of New Year's, with a bright array of painted faces, parades, and water. Our brothers and sisters in Judaism will prepare soon for their feast of Passover to celebrate the miracle that freed them as a people from Egyptian rule in their ancient past. Germanic pagans in Europe will celebrate Walpurgisnacht, exactly 6 months from the feast of All Hallows Eve, to commemorate the return of life to the world around them. In Teotihuacan, Mexico, celebrants will scale their Great Pyramid of the Sun, and they will stand there and hold their arms outstretched toward the sky, to ask blessings from the heavens, that this year may be filled with growth, warmth, and prosperity. Of course, Christianity of all flavors come together to celebrate Easter, the resurrection of their Lord, and the rising from his tomb, with our Catholic brethren observing Lent, to honor the suffering of their Lord prior to this miraculous resurrection. And many pagans, such as myself, come together to celebrate a holiday we have come to call Ostara. Though this holiday is very much a new and contemporary invention, and perhaps the goddess that it is named after is not an historically accurate one, what she represents is nothing less than the hope and rebirth of the earth itself. It's that the new life is seen all around us, and the earth itself is ready to move forward on our great wheel of the year. The essence of these spiritual festivals are very much needed in our day and age. For in just the past 5 generations or so, we as humanity have come to discover the most fascinating way to conquer the darkness of winter, with the discovery of electricity and the subsequent creation and continuous improvements of the light bulb. We seem that we are no longer wholly dependent on the sun and its life-giving light, all the things that this holiday represent. This far cry from the fires of our ancestors and those living within the parts of the world where power lines and electricity are a strange sight to behold. In a very real way, our modern technology, though it has given us this advantage, has taken much of the surprise and wonder of this season from our lives. So how can we, in the middle of this gathering place in the urban world, connect to the spirit of the vernal equinox? Well, at its heart, this festive time is all about celebrating the perseverance of life, the rebirth, renewal, and hope of all things new. We very much need this to what many feel like to be the darkest days of our spiritual lives. And for that, I'd like to share with you a story, a personal story. In the year 2011, the spring meant something very different for me. This was the year that I spent in Afghanistan. And though my enlistment in the military 2 years prior would inevitably lead me to this place, I was no less terrified when I arrived. You see, I had been taught as a pagan for years prior that this time meant hope and prosperity. But everything I was taught about service to my country told me that the same warm weather that was going to give me morale would inevitably lead with intense violence in that place. Sure enough, March 15th, I found myself in the middle of a military base that was infiltrated by 18 insurgents. And not to spoil the ending for you, but I did survive. And certainly while I did come out of it, I did not come out unscathed. There was a part of me that was so disillusioned with what I believed would be the rebirth and renewal of the earth. And all around me was the stench of war. And it just so happened, a few days later, was the spring equinox. And I found myself wandering in space with one of my close friends after a meal. And to my surprise, as we passed the local mosque that had been built on the base for our battle brethren of the Islamic tradition to worship, they were playing their call, Salat, to worship. And I stopped to listen to the prayer. And as I did so, I noticed a small, tiny red rose bush growing at the door to this mosque. Not just growing, but in early bloom. This reminded me, in a way that nothing else could have at this time, that life does go on. Of all the places I had expected to find roses, Afghanistan was the least expected. And I actually came to my knees and cried as I wondered at the one tiny, beautiful rose that had been brave enough to unfurl inside of all of those thorns. Spring was there. I found it there. And my faith was renewed, and I was able to carry on in the midst of all that hardship. So if you feel touched by this story and wish to embrace the magic of this equinox on the 22nd, here are some things that you can do. I personally love to begin with service. What better way to foster a renewal of good hope and faith than to give of ourselves to each other? Now, it doesn't have to be anything elaborate or huge. It can be something very small and anonymous, such as allowing someone to move into traffic ahead of you during rush hour. Maybe paying for someone ahead of you or behind you, more like in the drive-thru. Or making a small token of appreciation for a neighbor and leaving it on their doorstep. The possibilities of this service are endless and do not have to be large or elaborate to be meaningful. Another wonderfully restorative act that I enjoy is to create something beautiful. We are very familiar with the dyeing of eggs at this time of year with pastel colors, but there are many other options as well. I personally love to make watercolors, and especially of roses, to honor the spirit of that rose bush so many years ago. But anything bright and colorful to add that new joy, home, warmth to your home would be more than an honoring for this time of year. Another great life-celebrating act is to create new life itself by planting seeds and trees. And this time of year is especially potent for those new budding fruit trees that can add their great shade to our homes and provide fruit for our families. We could all do a little bit more shade when that 90-degree weather hits. So, another of my favorite is to spend some time to honor the memory and the wisdom of the trees. I take time to meditate on the buds that exist, on the pine and the fir, tiny little soft buds where everything else on it is so harsh. To look at the new shoots growing out of the alder and the oak, to see the marks of the animals who have passed through the winter, and to honor that this new life, this new growth, exists all around us. Thank you for welcoming me, and I wish you all a very blessed and happy Osara.